I raised my daughter Lena alone, and my place took care of her wedding. They called me a worthless dad who only completed middle school. Only elites would act in such a small manner, and only during this occasion. Lena, who had ripped off her bridal gown, disrupted the mood. "Dad, let's go home." "Yeah, let's do that." The visitors started to shudder as soon as I turned to go, because a scream came from an unexpected direction. The image in front of them was startling. Gavin is my name. This year, I turned 61. Lena is my only daughter. She has always had a special gift. "Daddy, look at this." Recently, 5-year-old Lena showed me a drawing she had done. It appeared to be a schematic from her disassembling a ballpoint pen. Lena was known at the time for disassembling objects to determine their construction. Although I had witnessed her disassembling innumerable pens, I never thought she would create a diagram of one. I could tell right away that this girl was going to be fantastic. Since Lena had never been able to play outside much due to her physical fragility, she began doing experiments in areas that interested her indoors. She developed an interest in meteorology and astronomy. "Daddy, why do clouds float in the sky?" She asked me out of genuine curiosity, even though it was something so obvious that I had never considered it. As you can see, clouds are not a single solid entity. Imagine them as a group of innumerable water drops. The weight of the constituent elements, temperature, and gravity force the droplets to float rather than fall. Lena heeded my advice, went to her science teacher, and researched clouds as much as she could from the library, even though I thought the explanation might be a little too complex for her age. Even her teachers were shocked by how well she grasped the concepts by the time she was 10 years old. She is gifted, indeed. I don't possess any special abilities myself, but her mother was smart and attractive, the epitome of beauty and intelligence. Her mother, my dear late wife, must have passed it on to her. Lena's mother died on the same day that Lena was born. There were no problems before to the birth, but my wife's condition deteriorated a few seconds after giving birth to Lena. Her heart halted in an instant, and her body arched abruptly. With the state of medicine today, the chances of survival are between 60 and 80%. Nevertheless, a lack of oxygen to the brain causes long-lasting damage in many people. However, there was an 80% probability of mortality and less sophisticated technology when Lena was born. This unusual illness, which only affects a few dozen people annually in the United States, was transmitted by my wife of all things. Ultimately, my wife went to heaven without ever seeing the child for whom she had sacrificed her life. I had no idea what to do. I liked my daughter Lena, of course. It never occurred to me that she had killed her mother, although occasionally I felt almost cruel when I saw her serene sleeping face, which was so like her mother's. What am I supposed to do now? With a loud crash, the months I had spent with my wife, anticipating Lena's arrival, and the bliss I had finally discovered fell apart. A flood of emotions overtook me, and I sobbed uncontrollably until my eyes dried up. Then a small voice spoke out to me, pleading with my fractured self for assistance. "Lena." "Oh, I see. Isn't it time for your milk? I will always keep you safe, so don't worry." I made a clear decision while cradling her delicate warmth in my arms. I would grow Lena to be a good adult, even if I had to do it by myself. As Lena's lone parent, I would give her anything she desires and be there for her through everything. Lena took a soft hold of my index finger, as though she were listening to my thoughts. "Hey, Dad." "What?" "Oh, what did we discuss once more?" "Get it together." Her stern tone brought me back to the present. My late wife was exactly like the woman in front of me, grinning as brilliantly as the sun. She's my daughter, Lena. She will turn 24 this year and has developed into a lovely, self-reliant woman. Her beautiful blue eyes, her long chestnut hair that is somewhat wavy, and her healthy, sun-kissed skin. Hey, Which of these looks better in your opinion? What about the dress on the right, which is powder blue? It looks lovely and complements your eyes." When Lena heard that, her eyes softly sparkled and she gave a small smile. Her mother's light blue eyes and slightly wavy chestnut hair were identical. Observing these minor similarities to my wife became a silent pleasure for me as Lena grew older. Lena is now on the verge of being married. Kyle, a man who works at the same company as her, is her fiancé. I thought well of him when they came to announce their engagement. I'm not really experienced yet. Lena is such a wonderful person that she probably doesn't even need a spouse. But instead of helping her or supporting her, individuals occasionally push themselves too hard. When she needs to slow down, I want to be the one to be there to support her. I was a little taken aback to hear a young man say that. Most importantly, though, I didn't mind since Lena chose him. His sincerity struck a chord with me, and I approved of the marriage. It's Lena's life, so it's not really important that I gave my consent. In front of Kyle, Lena, who typically had such a stern countenance, seemed like a little girl, which made me think of my time with my wife. The wedding preparations were proceeding swiftly before I realized it. "Still, is it all right that I haven't met his parents yet?" I whispered. I hadn't yet met Kyle's parents, but Lena and Kyle had already greeted both sets of parents. Neither of them appeared eager to set up a meeting before the wedding, but I felt that we should at least do that. "I don't think there's any need to meet before the wedding." "I concur. We don't have to force anything upon you, sir." It goes without saying that their comments sounded strange, as if they were concealing something. However, I figured it would be better to honor their desires and not press the matter because they must have had good reason for not wanting to meet. In light of that, I haven't really stepped in until now. I've been informed that Kyle and his parents will be arriving shortly, and this is what they call the rehearsal. Strangely enough, I felt anxious. For half an hour, I had been going through this strange routine of getting coffee and then going to the restroom. And they entered as I heard the door open. Kyle came in with two individuals I thought were his parents. Kyle's mom. Sierra examined me closely, looking from the top of my head to my toes. She appeared astonishingly young for her age of 70. I made an effort to get over the awkward feeling by introducing myself first. "It's good to meet you. I am Lena's father, Gavin." I reached out to shake hands, but they didn't do the same. I glanced up cautiously and saw them both, their icy gazes fixed on me. Oh, I thought that since Lena is so beautiful, her father must be really attractive. Sierra looked down on me and laughed sarcastically. About 5'7", Kyle's father, who was standing next to her, said in a strong, heavy voice while maintaining a serious demeanor. A quite unremarkable middle-of-the-road body with an average face that is neither overweight nor particularly thin. "Mr. Gavin, no." The well-known voice, suddenly brimming with irony, set off a chain reaction of ideas in my head. Only now did I realize that the haughty man in front of me was definitely someone I knew. "Tate, you must be joking with me." "That's correct. It's been a while. I never thought I'd see my old foe in such a setting. Tate and I were never that close during our 3 years of middle school together. Tate constantly finished second in our grade, right behind me, while I was always placed first. I had always been viewed as a rival by Tate. You're a really annoying person. You've consistently been at the top of the class. For once, could you let me have it? I detest perfectionists like you because of this." As I was reading my book, he would say stuff like that to me. I didn't consistently win first place because I was a perfectionist. Rather, it was because I couldn't be content unless I gave it my all. As a result of minor errors, my scores for the 5 subjects were consistently either perfect or 499 overall. Tate was intelligent too, but he was never as good as me. He would say things like that to me after each test. Then, one day in the early summer, just before we were going to graduate, A significant incident rocked my life. My parents died. I won't go into specifics, but I became completely unmotivated after that. As the summer heat started to cool off, I stayed at home in a deep despair and didn't even take the final exams. I was able to go up a grade because of my prior good grades, but I lived like a recluse in a relative's house. Tate looked down on me whenever he could, taking advantage of my weakness. You see, you received what was due to you. When you don't know how to give others their turn, this is what occurs. You've fallen out of grace now. In contrast to you, I intend to become a government official and am transferring to a prominent private high school. For the rest of your life, you will be forced to observe my accomplishment from the sidelines. Before he left my life, that was the final insult he hurled at me. He reportedly moved away to live in a dorm. After that, I broke off contact with my former classmates and didn't go to any reunions or activities. However, a glimmer of hope appeared in my life precisely when I felt I would never fully recover from the loss of my parents. My wife, who was 3 years older than me, was that hope. I was able to reevaluate my life and have the courage to go on after meeting her. I promised to preserve the priceless treasure she left behind, even if I eventually had to deal with losing another loved one. I've put my everything into Lena's future and worked nonstop. It comes out that my daughter's father-in-law is actually my former competitor, just when I believed she had met the one. It appears that my earlier weakness of fleeing was not something that fate was willing to overlook. I inhaled deeply and turned to Tate. I never thought I'd see you again at this age, Tate. He grinned menacingly. Yes, it's funny how life goes. Who would have guessed that my son would marry the daughter of a worthless middle school graduate like you? Indeed, life is uncertain. It was obviously offensive. I didn't mind if he made fun of me, but I couldn't stand to hear him disparage the daughter I had raised with so much effort. Regardless of what Tate said, I never retaliated, even in the past. Conflict has always irritated me. This time, though, I had a strong impulse to speak. Let me be clear. Lynette and Kyle are the ones getting married. Nothing more, nothing less. We are only becoming in-laws. Don't misunderstand that. It must have been nerve-wracking. With an attitude of superiority, Tate crossed his legs and sat down on a nearby sofa. I have no intention of becoming in-laws with someone like you, he muttered. I would admit that Lena is intelligent enough to be a good fit for our family, but after they are married, she will cut off all contact with you and turn into a complete stranger. When Lena gets married and joins our family, we intend to adopt her as our own daughter. Kyle objected before I had a chance to reply. Wait a minute, Dad. I've never heard of this before. Did you have any knowledge of this, Mom? Sierra responded in a light-hearted mocking tone. Oh, who knows? I'm merely a married woman in this family. Your father's words are definitive. It is going to happen if he says it. All right? Has conversing with a worthless middle school grad, Kyle, affected your IQ in any way? Not because of what Sierra said about me, but because she would say it to her own son. I had a great deal of disdain for her. I could see Kyle's clenched hands quivering a little as his face tightened. Now I knew why they had been so reluctant to present his parents to me. Kyle must have been shocked to learn that his father and I were acquainted. I couldn't help but question what kind of parents Sierra and Tate were as I considered their disrespect for even their own son and Tate's trivial comments. Lena spoke up before I could make up my mind on what to do. This type of tight environment cannot exist during rehearsal and dress fittings, can it? Please enjoy yourself without bringing up the earlier argument, as there is also a sampling for the co-meals today. She quickly shifted the topic. Sierra nodded and got to her feet. That's correct. This is not how we came here to squander time. Our goal is to make sure the food we serve to our visitors is of the highest caliber. I saw something strange about Sierra's minor dragging of her right foot as she turned around and left. Your right foot. Sierra interrupted me before I could say anything more. You don't need to worry. What could you possibly know as a recent middle school graduate? I let it go because I had nothing further to say, and they both walked away. Now that Lena, Kyle, and I were alone, the room was quiet. Kyle bent his head profoundly as the door closed. I sincerely apologize for my parents' impolite actions. Even I am powerless over their superiority mindset, which has always existed. I wish my brother could be here. It turned out that Kyle's older brother had died overseas. My sibling was a superb pharmacist. His fascination with pharmacology began at an early age, and everyone assumed he would pursue a career in the field. However, he abruptly declared he was leaving abroad on his 25th birthday. My folks made an effort to stop him. Things may have been different if he had gone to a world-class hospital for a vacation or to hone his talents. However, Kyle's brother's route was much more difficult. Are you familiar with the medical groups that work in hazardous regions of the world? My heart skipped a beat as I heard those words. Yes, of course, I said slowly, swallowing hard. You were your brother then? Kyle gave a silent nod. My parents tried to stop him because of this. There was nothing more to say. It was unnecessary for me to speculate about Kyle's feelings or what might have happened to his brother. It was too obvious. Lena swiftly dispelled the stifling mood that had descended upon the room. Hey, why are we becoming so depressed? Although I am aware of the narrative and have heard Kyle discuss his brother previously, I have no doubt that he would not want things to be this way. Kyle seemed to feel a little better after hearing Lena's words. Yes, you are correct. For now, let's just concentrate on the wedding. I want to apologize again, Gavin, for my parents' behavior. I touched Kyle's shoulder tenderly. The actual stars here are Lena and Kyle, regardless of how terrible his parents may be. All that matters is that they are content. After that, I made the decision to keep quiet about what had transpired. Tate and Sierra didn't say anything more. They smiled and didn't cause any more trouble for the remainder of the event, which could have been due to the presence of venue staff or simply their acting. This was the quiet before the storm, and I was unaware of it. Time flew by as I calmly savored the food and headed home, and before I knew it, the wedding day had come. Lena, who used to stroll behind me and say "Daddy," would grow up and wear a spotless white frock, something I never imagined would happen. I brought a picture of my late wife and I from a trip together to participate in the happiness of Lynette and Kyle's special day because I didn't believe it was acceptable to bring a huge shot of my late wife. I will always remember the ceremony as a lovely, poignant, and even mystical event. After that, we relocated to the reception area, but that's where the unexpected occurred. This seating chart, what is it? I was indeed classified as a useless middle school graduate. The staff hastened to get the charts, their cheeks white as they repeatedly bowed in apology, and I could hear whispers throughout the room as people took notice. Lena and Kyle were backstage changing their clothes at that point. I had no question who was responsible for this based on the staff's terrified response. What about that? My unique gift to you. When I looked around, Tate had a chilly, vindictive smile on his face. Although Sierra's expression was unreadable due to the folding fan covering her mouth behind Tate, it was obvious from her body language that she was making fun of me. I shuddered a little. The one who is mortified by this humiliation is Lena, not me. At this point in my life, being embarrassed in front of a large crowd at a wedding doesn't hurt at all. There would surely be whispers if the bride's father was humiliated in this way. I tried not to cause a scene up until now, but I had enough. To be 61 and still think about something so juvenile. Tate replied with a smug expression on his face, but I calmly reciprocated. I'm a man who rose to the position of government official after graduating from a prominent university. Lena is undoubtedly in a position as well because she works for a prestigious corporation. However, how about you? You stopped studying, turned into a recluse, skipped the high school entrance exam, and are still only a middle school graduate. Only the elite are invited to this festivity. You ought to depart right away." Tate's irate tone reverberated across the space. The throng of spectators swelled, interested in the disturbance. Concerned about the impact this might have on Lena's reputation, I opened my mouth to speak, but a cool, collected voice interrupted. "Let's head home, Dad." There was no mistake it, but it was deeper than normal. Lena's voice was heard. She was standing there, emotionless, as though she had lost all sensation when I turned around. She was back to her earlier casual attire, having thrown away her bridal gown. Beside her, the employees who had gathered the seating charts in a panic were shaking as they took in the scene. Lena had obviously heard it all. A little later, Kyle, who had removed his tuxedo and was also dressed down, joined us. "Leave, Gavin." I shuddered at the obvious fury in Kyle's voice, even if it was milder than Lena's. Tate and Sierra, meantime, were enraged. "Kyle, what does this signify? The reception is going to begin, Lena. Why are you acting in this way?" Sierra, who was much shorter, gave a little squeak as Kyle, who was 6'3", walked slowly approaching his mother. "What, mother? Do you not feel embarrassed by your actions? After my brother died, I know you want to put your expectations on me, but I'm not your puppet. I wish to live my life as I see fit. Ms., I will return your kindness, but if you both keep acting this way, I'm willing to cut off all contact with you." There was a thick quiet in the room. Too scared to get further involved, the visitors who had been silently observing murmured to one another. Unable to control his rage, Tate yelled, "How dare you? It is not acceptable to disobey your parents. All right, you and Lena can go. We're off to this wedding. Totally off." There had been no change. The same Tate who had earlier yelled at me to give him the top rank in school was still there. I was too tired to even let out a sigh. I turned to Lena and said, "You're right," ignoring Tate. "Let's head home." The wedding could not go on after Tate declared it canceled. Even though we were bothering the visitors, it felt like the best course of action to depart at this time. A cry broke out behind me as I turned to go. When I turned around, I saw Sierra fall to the ground, her face going white. Panic set in, with several guests yelling in bewilderment. I hurried to her right away. "Hey, how are you treating my wife?" For the first time, I spoke up when Tate attempted to step in. "Do you wish for her to pass away here?" My remarks caused Tate to freeze, and I called for an ambulance while he remained stunned. Still in shock over his mother's death, Kyle stood still, unable to process what had happened. Frantically, people gathered around to inquire about the situation. Lena hurried to my side, pushing through the crowd. "Dad," she added. She felt lightheaded earlier. Her hands were shaking when she assisted me in lowering the veil, and her steps appeared wobbly. This was unquestionably a stroke. I swiftly rolled Sierra over onto her side, lifted her head a little, and calmly spoke to her. There was a faint reply from her. I had to keep a tight eye on her condition until the ambulance arrived, even though it had already been called. I would be forced to administer CPR if things became worse. Kyle had calmed down and hurried over as I rolled up my sleeves. What will become of my mother? She is thankfully still conscious, but if care is delayed after a stroke, there may be serious consequences or worse. Until help comes, we'll try our best. Kyle gave a forceful nod, but Tate was the one who was still struggling to understand. "Hey, leave Sierra alone." He was obviously in a panic, unable to comprehend what had transpired. Tate, apparently unable to hear anyone, continued yelling her name in spite of his family members' attempts to calm him down and explain. As I watched him, I couldn't help but reflect on my own history. I prayed as I glanced at my wife's picture in my pocket. Let me save her this time, please. Give me courage. At that moment, the ambulance's arrival was announced by the workers outside. I stuffed the picture back in my pocket and braced myself as I hurried in. Kyle informed me that Sierra had survived the procedure a few hours later. Lena and I were handling the return of presents and explaining the situation after Sierra was brought in because the wedding had to be canceled nonetheless. However, I felt my body go slack when I heard that Sierra had been spared. Lena was on my side. "Dad, you did fantastic. I'm very happy she survived." "Yes, but it hasn't ended yet. There are still many things to attend to." As we strolled along the moonlit street, Len gave a slow nod. Sierra was admitted to the hospital, so we made our way there, with visiting hours ending at 8:00 p.m. We had only roughly half an hour left. We ran to the room, and when we got there, Sierra was just waking up, staring at the ceiling, and Tate was holding her hand and crying violently. When Kyle saw us, he motioned for us to come in. "I appreciate you coming, Dad. Hurry up." Tate appeared to be prompted by Kyle's words as he shifted uncomfortably, opening and closing his mouth as though he was trying to think of anything to say. I let out a sigh. "Look, I didn't follow your instructions to save Sierra. I don't require some evasive gratitude." Tate cast a shamed glance down. There was a momentary pause before Sierra's hoarse voice murmured something. "Sophia, don't push yourself, Mom. For now, just take it easy." Sierra fell back asleep as Kyle's soft words soothed her. "Please wait here for a minute, Dad." Lena and Kyle decided to get takeout for dinner after they left the hospital. Tate and I were left alone in an unsettling silence after that. Unexpectedly, Tate was the first to speak. "I was totally useless when Sierra fell apart. You and Lena maintained your composure. Have you ever held a medical position?" Tate was probably astonished since he still thought I only had a middle school diploma. It was time to give an account of my life's events. No, I didn't finish middle school. After a few years of delay, I eventually completed my GED and enrolled in college. I went on to become a doctor. Doctor. Tate had previously stated that he too aspired to become a doctor, I remembered. Given his aspirations, I had thought Tate would seek a medical degree, but that was not the case. Being a high-ranking bureaucrat is undoubtedly remarkable, but it appears Tate wasn't driven by enthusiasm to pursue that career path. It was a generation-old tradition in my family to become a bureaucrat. There was a lot of pressure, and my father was always criticizing me for never being able to take first place in school. Tate acknowledged that this was the reason he was so fixated on being the best. But what good would it do if I were the only one who helped him get there? Tate, too, had realized that. I was relieved when your grades did not allow you to transfer to a prestigious high school. That helped me succeed in college, become the best student at my new school, and finally work as a bureaucrat. But because he wasn't there, no matter how high I rose, I always felt empty within. "You mean Keith?" When I uttered the name of his late son, Tate's eyes widened in surprise. He stared at me as he froze. I showed him the picture of my wife that I had taken out of my pocket. My wife and I were in the photo. "How are you acquainted with Keith?" In a medical aid group, Keith and I collaborated closely. Keith, who was well versed in medical, worked as a nurse with my wife, Sophia. Numerous lives were saved by us. I felt a twinge of sadness and nostalgia in my heart. That day would always be in my memory. Keith's last moments as a member of the medical staff should make you proud. He bravely performed his duty. Even though Sophia and I tried our best, Keith asked that the priceless resources be used for the underprivileged kids, not for himself. He has a very good heart. I didn't know his tale because he never talked about his family, but I think it's time to share it with you. I reached into my wallet and pulled out something. The piece of paper was tiny. Keith left a note behind. Tate broke down in tears as he read the note and fell on the floor. Keith wasn't actually my son. Despite not being Keith's biological father, I loved him as if he were my own when I married Sierra when he was 13. And he's gone now. Oh, Keith. Under the brilliant night sky, Tate collapsed at his knees, tears pouring down his face and creating a big puddle on the tarmac. At that moment, Lena and Kyle came back, running over, startled to see Tate like this. Tate, however, was crying like a child and was too distraught to explain. I went to see Sierra in the hospital a few days after she recovered enough to speak. Even though she was still unable to move from her bed, the prompt treatment prevented permanent harm, and she would be able to resume her regular life after rehabilitation. Sierra spoke as soon as she spotted me. "Isn't that a picture of Sophia? You are familiar with my wife." Quietly closing her eyes, Sierra disclosed a surprising link. "I went to England to study abroad when I was 19. I met Sophia while I was pursuing my nursing degree. We connected because we both admired Florence Nightingale, even though she was only 13 at the time. I had to abandon my goal of becoming a nurse when I became pregnant with Keith at the age of 21. Sophia must have developed into an excellent nurse though, didn't she? As Sierra had predicted, Sophia had become known as the Saint with the Lamp, and was dubbed the modern-day Nightingale in the field. Sophia was 35 when we first met, but she had extraordinary nursing skills. Together with Keith, we saved numerous lives while working together and getting married. I lost control and behaved in a way that was completely out of character for a doctor when Keith passed out during a mission due to a stroke. Even so, Sophia maintained her composure, and Keith put the needs of others before his own, even as his consciousness waned. I told Keith that I would bring a message to his parents if I ever went back to the States. He expressed his desire that his parents would live long lives, even though his own life would end there. Given the family history of strokes, he particularly urged his mother to take additional care of her health. Tate had already informed Sierra of Keith's fate. Remaining composed, she nodded slightly. Then she said strainedly, "Tate and I were obsessed with Kyle after Keith's death. Lena and you were harmed by our pride and bigotry, even though we wanted him to lead a happy and normal life. I didn't understand how stupid we had been until I saw the expression on Kyle's face. Please allow me to express my regret and gratitude for saving my life, even though apologizing won't make it better." She held out her hand to shake hands. Her action made it obvious that she was sincere. I had no reason not to accept it. I fulfilled my obligations as a doctor. I don't need your gratitude for that. But please apologize to Lena when she comes to visit. All I ask is that. Sierra stared me in the eye as we shook hands, tears streaming down her cheeks for a few long, emotional seconds. Following that, the two families got together and made amends. Even if I might never be able to forgive Tate and Sierra for what they did, I think it's sufficient to own their errors. Lena's happiness is the most important thing, and that's all that counts. "The baby just moved, Dad," Lena said, massaging her somewhat protuberant abdomen. Standing next to her, Kyle gave Lena and their unborn child a tender embrace, his arms around them in a protective embrace. The happiness I had always desired was present in this ordinary, everyday moment. Lena's happiness would have been Sophia's top priority as well. It was one day that Tate called me. "Please come to Keith's grave and pay your respects." I went straight there without thinking. It was easy to forget we were in a cemetery because of the nearly tranquil beauty created by the sunshine filtering softly through the trees and the gently swaying, well-kept plants. A laminated letter had been placed in front of Keith's grave. "I'm doing great." It was only one statement, but it spoke a lot. Keith must have left it in the hopes that his parents would be comforted. Despite the fact that Keith's sickness unfortunately ended his life before he could accomplish his goal, the note eloquently encapsulated his cheery, carefree, and bright personality. "Keith, welcome home." I was positive Tate's comments had reached Keith when a light wind blew through, lifting them upward. Keith's calm, trouble-free heart appeared to be reflected in the clear sky above us.